She can't see the world, yet she saw the loneliness he'd been hiding for years. If stories of love, healing, and second chances touch your heart, please subscribe and stay with us until the very last chapter of this journey. The Texas sun was dipping low over Zilker Park, painting the fields in amber and rose. The laughter of families mixed with the faint hum of guitars from the fall festival nearby. Ethan Walker stood apart from the crowd, his sleek black phone pressed to his ear, voice clipped and precise. "Finalize the M&A clause before midnight," he instructed, eyes fixed on the skyline of Austin. Walker Dynamics doesn't delay. He didn't notice the small sound at first, a soft tap, like a cane against his shoe. Then, a voice barely louder than a whisper. "Sir, could you help me, please?" Ethan turned. The sight froze him. A little girl, no older than 7, stood holding a small white stuffed dog. Her round sunglasses hid her eyes, and a slim white cane trembled in her hand. Her shoes were dusty, her brown hair slightly tangled from the wind. "I can't find my mom," she said. Her voice was steady, polite, too calm for a child who had clearly been alone too long. Something in Ethan's chest tightened. "Where did you last see her?" "Near the music," she said, pointing uncertainly toward the festival tents. "But people moved. I heard too many steps, and Snow got scared." She hugged the stuffed dog closer, as though it could protect her. Ethan crouched to her level. "Snow?" "My dog," she said softly. "Not real, but he listens." Her lips curved faintly. "You smell like expensive coffee and sadness." The words hit him harder than any boardroom critique ever had. Ethan looked away. No one had spoken to him like that, not since his sister died 5 years ago. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Lily Grace Bennett." He hesitated before answering. "I'm Ethan." Lily nodded as if memorizing the sound, her small fingers brushing the air until they found his wrist. "Your heart beats fast," she said. "Are you worried about me?" Ethan exhaled. "Maybe I am." From across the park came the sound of a woman's voice, raw, trembling, desperate. "Lily, Lily!" Lily turned toward it instantly, her face lighting up. "Mommy?" Rachel Bennett appeared running down the path, her nurse's badge swinging, her scrubs damp with sweat. She dropped to her knees, arms around her daughter. "Oh God, Lily, you scared me." "I stayed where you told me," the little girl said softly. "I waited." Rachel looked up at Ethan, breathless, gratitude and embarrassment mingled in her eyes. "Thank you, sir. I must have looked away for a minute." "It's all right," Ethan replied quietly. "You found her." Lily tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, this is Ethan. He sounds like he needs to smile more." Rachel laughed weakly. "She's very observant." The wind shifted and dark clouds began to crawl over the Austin skyline. A single raindrop landed on Lily's cheek, then another. Within seconds, the park turned silver with rain. Rachel tried to lift Lily, but her arms trembled from fatigue. Ethan took off his tailored jacket without thinking, wrapping it gently around the child and her stuffed dog. "You'll catch cold," he said. Lily's hands reached out, brushing the lapel. "Your coat's warm, like when Mommy's heartbeat is close." Something broke open inside him. A silence filled with rain, memory, and an ache he hadn't let himself feel in years. When the downpour eased, Rachel thanked him again. "You've done more than enough, Mr. Walker." He almost told her his name meant nothing tonight, that it felt strange to be called Mr. by someone whose shoes were soaked through and whose hands still shook from fear. Instead, he said, "Can I give you a ride home?" Rachel shook her head politely. "We live close. Thank you, but we'll manage." Lily turned her head toward him, smiling faintly. "Good night, Ethan. Don't be sad anymore, okay?" He watched them disappear down the wet path, the small cane tapping softly against the pavement. The white dog clutched close to her chest. For a long moment, Ethan remained under the tree, rain dripping from his hair, phone silent in his pocket. He didn't know why his heart wouldn't stop racing, or why a blind child's words felt like light breaking through his own darkness. But he knew this. He would see her again, even if she couldn't see him. The rain came down heavier than the city lights could handle. Austin shimmered in a haze of silver, its skyline blurred behind a curtain of water. Ethan's jacket clung to his shoulders as he crossed the path toward the parking lot, his shoes squelching in the mud. But his mind wasn't on the meeting he'd missed or the investors waiting for his call. It was on the image of a blind little girl clutching a white stuffed dog under the rain. Something about her voice, soft but certain, kept replaying in his head. "You smell like expensive coffee and sadness." He hadn't realized how true that was until now. Near Barton Springs Road, headlights flashed. A car door opened. A familiar voice called out through the storm. "Ethan!" He turned. Rachel Bennett was running toward him, holding her purse above her head, drenched but smiling faintly. "I just wanted to thank you again," she said, out of breath, "for helping Lily earlier." "You shouldn't be out in this weather," he said, glancing at her soaked scrubs. "I was on my way to my shift," she explained. "Dell Children's doesn't really stop for rain." Her tone was light, but her hands trembled as she brushed wet strands of hair from her face. Ethan noticed the small details, the exhaustion in her eyes, the faded hospital badge clipped to her pocket, the way her shoes squished with every step. "Can I give you a ride?" he offered. Rachel hesitated. "You've done enough." "I insist," he said simply. She studied him for a moment before nodding. "All right, but only because the bus won't make it through this rain." Inside his black Tesla, the heater hummed softly. The silence between them wasn't awkward, just fragile, like both were afraid to speak too loud. "Lily's remarkable," Ethan said finally. Rachel smiled at the window. "She's everything good I've ever done." "How long has she been—" He paused, careful with his words. "Blind?" "Since birth," she replied quietly. "Leber congenital amaurosis. We tried to get her into a gene therapy program, but insurance called it experimental." Ethan frowned. "That therapy's FDA approved for certain mutations. Which variant?" Rachel blinked, surprised. "You know about it?" He nodded. "Walker Dynamics develops AI for genetic diagnosis. It's my field." Her face softened, then tightened again. "It's the RPE65 variant. But even then, the cost—" She shook her head. "I pick up every extra shift I can, but it's still out of reach." Ethan wanted to ask more, but Lily's small voice interrupted from the back seat. "Mommy? I can hear the rain smiling." Rachel turned, her exhaustion melting into tenderness. "That's because it's happy you're safe." Lily reached forward, her small hand brushing the air until it touched Ethan's sleeve. "You're the man from the park." "Yes," he said, smiling. "Still soaked, though." "Then I'll share snow with you?" She placed her stuffed dog on his knee. "He keeps sad people dry." Rachel's eyes misted. "Lily, that's very kind." "Kindness is cheaper than umbrellas," the girl said wisely. Ethan chuckled under his breath. "That's true." They pulled up outside a narrow apartment complex on South Congress Avenue. The building leaned slightly, its siding faded from years of Texas sun. Rachel gathered her things, pausing before opening the door. "Thank you," she said softly. "I know people like you don't usually stop for people like us." Ethan met her gaze. "People like me?" "You know, CEOs, suits, billion-dollar smiles?" Her voice was teasing, but the undertone wasn't lost on him. He smiled faintly. "Maybe some of us are just trying to remember how to be human." Lily giggled. "You sound like a robot learning feelings." He laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. "Maybe I am." Rachel's expression softened. "If that's true, you're doing pretty well." Thunder rumbled again. Ethan glanced at the dark clouds overhead. "At least take this." He handed her his umbrella. "You'll need it," she protested. "I have a car," he said. "You have a little girl." Rachel hesitated, then accepted it. "Thank you, Ethan." He watched them climb the worn stairs to the second floor, Lily counting softly under her breath. 1, 2, 3. Her small hand tracing the railing. When they disappeared inside, the light from their window flickered through the rain. Ethan lingered there, staring up at it until his reflection blurred on the windshield. He didn't understand why his heart was still heavy, or why the sound of her voice, both the mother's and the child's, felt like a chord he couldn't stop hearing. Maybe because for the first time in years, someone had looked at him, not with expectation or ambition, but with something simpler. Recognition. He started the car, whispering into the quiet cabin, "Lily Grace Bennett." The name tasted like hope, and he had no idea how deeply it would change everything. The morning after the storm, Austin gleamed under a washed blue sky. Ethan Walker sat alone in his penthouse overlooking Lady Bird Lake, the steam from his untouched coffee rising like a thin ghost. He had a dozen missed calls from his legal department, 3 from investors, and 1 from the PR head asking why he'd skipped the post-merger dinner. He didn't answer any of them. Instead, his laptop screen glowed with a single name in the search bar: Lily Grace Bennett. He hesitated. For a man who built a company on data ethics and medical privacy, even typing that felt like crossing a line. Yet something deeper than curiosity pushed him forward. Something that had begun the moment that blind little girl said he smelled like sadness. He called Marcus Hale, his head of security and longtime friend, a former FBI investigator with a quiet sense of loyalty. "Marcus," Ethan said, "I need a personal background check. Nothing illegal, public records only, and only if her mother consents later." There was a pause on the line. "You've never asked for a personal search before." "I know. Who is she?" Ethan looked out the window at the shimmering lake. A child who shouldn't have to live in the dark because the system failed her. Marcus didn't ask more. "Send me what you have." 2 hours later, a secured file landed in Ethan's inbox. It wasn't long, barely 20 pages, but every line carried weight. Name: Lily Grace Bennett. Age: 7. Condition: Leber congenital amaurosis, suspected RPE 65 variant. Status: candidate for gene therapy, waitlisted due to financial and administrative barriers. Ethan scrolled further. Letters from Dell Children's Medical Center, insurance claim denials, appeals stamped received but pending. Rachel Bennett's handwritten note at the bottom of one: "Please reconsider. My daughter still believes light exists." He set the tablet down, pressing his thumb to his forehead. The words "light exists" echoed through him. On a whim, he opened the Walker Dynamics medical AI portal. "Let's see what the system says, Lily," he murmured. He entered her anonymized data into the prototype diagnostic engine his company had developed for pediatric gene screening. A few seconds later, the algorithm produced a result. Variant confirmed. RPE65 associated LCA. FDA approved for voretigene neparvovec gene therapy. Estimated recovery. Partial visual restoration. Ethan exhaled slowly. The treatment was real. It was possible. But the cost? $500,000 per eye, and a labyrinth of bureaucratic approvals, institutional review board, ethics committee, informed consent, post-therapy monitoring. He remembered Rachel's weary voice. Insurance called it experimental. It wasn't experimental anymore. It was medicine, proven and published. He called Marcus again. Get me the full FDA docket and the Dell Children's trial documentation. I want to know why her insurance flagged it. You're diving deep for someone you just met, boss, Marcus warned. Ethan smiled faintly. Let's call it corrective empathy. While waiting, he opened the framed photo on his desk. A girl with dark hair and the same tender curiosity as Lily. His sister, Hannah. Lost at 15 to a misdiagnosed retinal disorder long before such therapies existed. He whispered, if this had existed back then. Marcus called back an hour later. I've got it. Looks like the insurer coded her procedure under the wrong CPT modifier. Listed as retinal reconstruction, not gene transfer. Bureaucratic nonsense. Ethan clenched his jaw. Meaning? Meaning she was denied on paper, not on science. Ethan stood abruptly. Then we fixed the paper. He forwarded everything to his compliance counsel with a terse note. Review ethical grounds for philanthropic intervention. No disclosure of identities. Then he opened a new folder on his desktop and labeled it Project Snowlight. Inside, he placed 3 files, one of Hannah, one of Lily's clinical summary, and one blank document titled Action Plan. Hours passed. The sun arced toward evening, scattering reflections across the lake. Ethan finally shut his laptop, a decision crystallizing inside him. He would not give Rachel charity. He would give her a system that worked. His phone buzzed with Marcus's final message for the day. She applied to the Pediatric Vision Fund 2 years ago, still waitlisted. Ethan stared at the screen, fingers tightening. 2 years of waiting while a curable child lived in darkness. He whispered, not anymore. Outside, the lights of Austin flickered to life. Inside, for the first time in years, Ethan felt purpose burn. Not ambition, not profit, but something older. Hope wearing a white stuffed dog's name. The air inside Dell Children's Medical Center always smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender lotion. It was the kind of smell that clung to uniforms, hands, and memories long after a shift ended. Rachel Bennett walked down the corridor of the pediatric rehab unit, her badge flickering under the fluorescent light. She was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix, but the slow, bone-deep exhaustion that came from fighting systems bigger than herself. She had 2 jobs, 1 dream, and a daughter who believed in sunlight she'd never seen. Hey, Rachel, a fellow nurse called softly from the med station. You've got a visitor in the waiting lounge. Rachel frowned. At this hour? Tall guy, suit, looks like a CEO from some commercial. She exhaled, half amused, half wary. He is. When she stepped into the lounge, Ethan Walker was sitting by the vending machine, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. On the chair beside him lay a small box wrapped in brown paper and tied with a ribbon. Mr. Walker, she began, still cautious. It's late. I know, he said, standing. I'm sorry for showing up unannounced. I just brought something for Lily. Rachel hesitated before taking the box. Inside were Braille storybooks, tactile puzzles, and a small model of a dog that matched Lily's stuffed toy, Snow. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her voice softening despite herself. "I wanted to," Ethan replied. "You mentioned how she learns through touch. I thought this might help." For a moment, Rachel simply looked at him. The man who'd appeared in a rainstorm and now stood under the hum of hospital lights, offering her child a bit of wonder. "Thank you," she said finally. "She'll love them." Ethan smiled faintly. "How's she doing?" "She's asleep at home with my neighbor watching her. I'll pick her up after this shift." He nodded. "Do you always work nights?" "Mostly. The night shift pays more." There was no bitterness in her tone, just practicality. Ethan recognized it. He'd spoken that same way about mergers and deadlines for years. The overhead speaker chimed softly. "Code maintenance, level 2. A nurse rushed in. "Drainage line burst in the east wing hallway." "We need towels and sandbags now." Rachel's eyes widened. "That's near the pediatric reading room. Lily's books are stored there." Without hesitation, Ethan followed her down the hall. The floor gleamed under emergency lights, water spreading from a cracked drain cover. "Over here!" Rachel knelt, pulling a plastic tub from under a shelf. Inside were Lily's Braille books, damp but not destroyed. Ethan dropped to his knees beside her, rolling up his sleeves. "Let me," he said, grabbing extra towels from the maintenance cart. Together they blotted the pages one by one, working in silence except for the hum of wet fans. "You don't have to," Rachel began. "I know," Ethan said, not looking up. "But I want to." When they finished, she sat back against the wall, hair damp with sweat and steam. Ethan leaned beside her, breathing hard, his once pristine shirt streaked with water. "Guess we both got promoted to janitorial duty," he joked softly. Rachel laughed, a small sound that made the sterile corridor feel human again. "Maybe you should add that to your resume." Ethan glanced at her, smiling in the dim light. "I'll list it right under knows how to ruin expensive shoes for a good cause." Their laughter faded into a comfortable quiet. Then Rachel said, almost to herself, "Sometimes it feels like the universe notices when you try too hard, and still asks for more." Ethan looked at her profile, the exhaustion, the fire still flickering in her eyes. "Maybe it's not asking for more," he said quietly. "Maybe it's asking who won't give up." Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the noise of the hospital seemed to fade away. A nurse walked by and smiled at them. "You two make a good team." Rachel blushed, glancing down. "We're just cleaning up a mess." But Ethan thought, maybe that's where most healing begins. Later that night, he followed her to the hospital's small staff kitchen. Rachel reheated a bowl of leftover pasta, splitting it into 2 cups. "Hospital dining, a la microwave," she said, passing one to him. Ethan took it without hesitation. "Best meal I've had all week." Rachel laughed, shaking her head. "You really don't belong here, do you?" "Maybe I do more than you think." Outside, the rain had stopped. Through the tall windows, the Austin skyline glimmered. Rachel sipped her tea, her gaze softening. "You know," she said quietly, "Lily told me something after meeting you. She said your voice has colors." Ethan tilted his head. "Colors?" "She said it sounds like silver and blue, sad but kind." For the first time, Ethan didn't hide behind a corporate smile. "Maybe she sees more than all of us." When the intercom finally announced shift change at 4 a.m., Rachel walked him to the lobby. "Thank you again for everything tonight." He looked around the quiet hospital, the faint hum of machines, the gentle rhythm of life being stitched back together every second. "I should be thanking you," he said softly. You do this every night. Rachel smiled, weary but warm. Somebody has to. As she turned to leave, Ethan called after her, Rachel? She turned. He hesitated. If there's ever anything I can do, really do, please let me. She nodded slowly. We'll see, Mr. Walker. The elevator doors closed between them, but the warmth lingered long after he'd gone. The following week brought heat back to Austin, the kind that shimmered over the asphalt like a mirage. Yet even under that dry Texas sky, Ethan Walker couldn't shake the image of the hospital hallway. Rachel's damp hair, her quiet laughter, and Lily's braille books spread across the floor like wounded soldiers he'd helped rescue. When he called the maintenance office of Rachel's apartment complex to follow up on the plumbing repair, the answer made him pause. Sir, we sent a crew, but the building's older than the permit says. We're shutting down half the units for safety inspection. He frowned. And the tenants? Relocation in 48 hours, temporary motels if they can't find family. That night, while reviewing quarterly reports, Ethan couldn't focus. The numbers blurred into meaningless columns. He saw only Lily tracing her cane along cracked floor tiles and Rachel counting dollar bills to keep the lights on. He made a call to his property management office. Prepare the condo on Lady Bird Lake, the ADA-compliant one. Make sure the tactile markers are installed by morning, and have security adjust the voice navigation system. When Rachel got home from her shift that dawn, a letter was taped to her door. It wasn't from the landlord. It bore the embossed logo of Walker Dynamics. Ms. Bennett, due to building repairs, please consider this an offer of temporary residence in my guest condo by Lady Bird Lake. It's fully accessible and secure. No obligation, no publicity, no cost. Ethan Walker. Rachel stared at it for a long time. The ceiling leaked again, dripping onto her worn shoes. She sighed. That afternoon, she and Lily arrived at the lakeside condo. The building rose with glass and steel reflections of the water. Inside, everything glowed softly. Textured walls, low lighting, voice-activated doors. Ethan waited in the foyer, sleeves rolled up, his expression hesitant. It's temporary, he said quickly. Until your place is fixed. Rachel's lips parted in protest, but Lily interrupted first. Mommy, this house has a kind sound. Ethan smiled faintly. That's the lake echoing through the glass. The girl's small hands reached out, touching the wall. It feels smooth, but there's a sad whisper hiding inside. Rachel met Ethan's eyes. She means the emptiness, she said softly. Places remember when no one laughs in them. For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy between them. Then Ethan bent down beside Lily. Let's fix that, he said. How about you teach this house how to laugh? Lily giggled, clutching her stuffed dog, Snow. Snow can start! As movers brought in their few boxes, Ethan guided Rachel through the safety features. Tactile strips leading from Lily's room to the kitchen, soft lights along the floor, railings where needed. You thought of everything, Rachel murmured, surprised. I had help, Ethan said. One of our accessibility consultants used to design for the Texas School for the Blind. She believes texture is memory. Rachel smiled, genuine this time. Lily will love that. But the tenderness didn't last long. That evening, while unpacking, Lily wandered into the lobby. The vast marble floor amplified every sound. She took a wrong turn, her cane tapping nervously. Mommy? Her small voice echoed. Snow? Where are you? Panic flared. The reflections and glass surfaces confused her. Too much space, too much sound. Ethan, hearing the tremor in her voice, rushed out from the kitchen. He spotted her near the elevator, frozen. "It's okay, Lily," he called softly. "I'm here." Her head turned toward the sound, uncertain. "Where's the wall?" "Right beside you," he said, stepping closer. "I've got you." When she reached toward him, her foot slipped on the polished floor. Without thinking, Ethan caught her, lifting her into his arms. The small stuffed dog fell to the ground, landing silently beside them. Lily gripped his neck, trembling. "Everything's loud when I can't tell where I am," she whispered. "I know," Ethan said, his voice low and steady. "I've been lost before, too." She pressed her ear against his chest. "Your heart sounds calmer now." Rachel arrived seconds later, breathless. Seeing Ethan holding her daughter, her fear melted into something more complex, part gratitude, part vulnerability. "I'm so sorry," she said. "She must have followed the echo." Ethan shook his head. "She's safe. That's all that matters." He bent to pick up the stuffed dog and placed it gently into Lily's arms. "Snow's a brave little guard." Lily smiled sleepily. "Snow says thank you." Rachel looked at him, really looked, and for the first time saw past the CEO exterior. The man standing before her wasn't the billionaire from the news. He was someone who understood silence, who carried his own kind of blindness. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Rachel stepped out to the balcony. The lake stretched wide below, shimmering under the city lights. Ethan was there, hands resting on the railing. "You didn't have to do all this," she said quietly. "I know." "Then why?" He turned to her, the reflection of the water flickering in his eyes. "Because once, someone I loved couldn't be helped in time. I guess I'm trying to change how that story ends. For someone else." Rachel swallowed hard. "You can't save everyone, Ethan." "Maybe not," he said. "But maybe we can save one. And sometimes that's enough." The air between them held the sound of crickets, distant city murmurs, and the rhythm of the lake against the shore. Rachel leaned on the railing beside him, the fatigue easing from her shoulders. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. And somewhere behind them, in the quiet of the condo, Lily whispered in her sleep, "Snow, this house isn't sad anymore." The rhythm of their new life fell into place quietly, like pages turning in a book that no one wanted to end. Each morning, Lily woke to the soft chime of the condo's voice navigation system. Ethan had programmed it himself, choosing a calm female voice that announced, "Good morning, Lily. It's a bright day by the lake." By 9, Rachel walked her daughter to Texas School for the Blind, her hospital badge clipped neatly to her scrub pocket before heading to Dell Children's for another night shift. Ethan drove them sometimes, not as a benefactor, but as part of a routine that had started to feel natural. He found himself looking forward to those early drives, the way Lily narrated the world she couldn't see. "Mr. Ethan," she'd say from the back seat, "the trees sound happy today. Are they dancing?" "Maybe," he'd reply with a smile. "Or maybe they're just listening." But for every moment of light, there were shadows waiting. One evening, Rachel came home to find Ethan in the living room, reading through a thick folder. On the coffee table lay medical charts, letters from the insurance company, and forms stamped with the logo of Travis County Health Authority. Her voice sharpened. "Where did you get those?" Ethan looked up slowly. "Public documents. Marcus helped collect them, only with data you've already shared in applications. Nothing private." "Nothing private?" Rachel repeated, her tone trembling between disbelief and anger. "These are Lily's test results, her treatment denials, her medical codes. That's her life on that table." Ethan stood, trying to keep his voice steady. "Rachel, I wasn't trying to invade anything. I'm trying to help. There are pathways for appeal, for coverage reclassification. I know the process. You don't understand, she said, clutching the folder to her chest. When people like you start digging, people like me lose what little control we have left. He took a step closer. This isn't about control. It's about giving her a chance. Rachel's eyes glistened. And what happens after you're done being generous, Ethan? When the next deal pulls you away? I can't let my daughter be another project you finish and file away. The words hit him harder than he expected. For a long moment he said nothing. Then quietly he replied, "That's not who I am." Rachel shook her head. You don't even see it. You talk about consent, about ethics, about systems, but you didn't ask. You decided. Her voice cracked on the last word. The silence that followed was thick with things neither could say. Finally, Rachel whispered, "We'll leave tomorrow." Lily appeared in the hallway, still in her pajamas, clutching snow. "Mommy, why are you crying?" Rachel knelt, forcing a smile. "It's okay, sweetheart. We're just packing." Ethan's voice softened. "Lily, it's late. You should sleep." The little girl turned her head toward him, sensing the tension she couldn't see. "Did something bad happen?" "No," he said, though his chest ached. "Nothing bad. Just grown-up things." Lily reached out, placing her small hand on his wrist. "Your heart sounds loud again, Mr. Ethan. That means you're sad." He swallowed hard. "Maybe I am." That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She stood by Lily's bed, listening to her daughter's steady breathing, the sound of crickets beyond the window, the faint hum of the city. On the nightstand lay the Braille storybook Ethan had given them. She touched its damp corner, the one he'd helped dry at the hospital, and felt her anger flicker, uncertain. In the living room, Ethan sat alone in the dark. The lake outside shimmered under the moonlight, its surface broken by the occasional ripple of wind. He stared at the folder she'd taken, the empty coffee cup beside him, and the hollow ache inside his chest. He had built his company on informed consent, the foundation of medical ethics. Yet with Rachel he had forgotten to ask, not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much, too fast. The next morning he woke to the sound of the front door opening. Rachel stood there, suitcase in one hand, Lily's small fingers in the other. "Thank you for everything," she said quietly. "But we need to go home. We'll find another place." Ethan looked at Lily, who was tracing the air, trying to picture his face. "Goodbye, Mr. Ethan," she said softly. "Don't be lonely, okay?" He forced a smile. "I'll try." When the door closed behind them, the condo fell silent again. The tactile floor lights blinked on automatically, leading to the hallway that now felt empty. Ethan stood there for a long time, surrounded by all the things he had built to help others, and realizing that no amount of technology could rebuild trust once it cracked. By nightfall, he drove to Lady Bird Lake, parked by the boardwalk, and watched the reflection of city lights tremble across the water. The same water that Lily once said sounded kind. He whispered to himself, "I should have asked." The breeze carried his words away, scattering them like pieces of regret. Somewhere across the city, a little girl clutched her stuffed dog and whispered to her mother, "Snow says Mr. Ethan's heart is still looking for home." 3 weeks passed. Austin had already shifted from late summer gold to the crisp light of early fall. The city buzzed with the hum of students returning to UT Austin, coffee shops overflowing along Guadalupe Street, the sidewalks painted with the sound of new beginnings. But for Ethan Walker, the season felt quieter than ever. The condo by Lady Bird Lake stood immaculate, every tactile strip still in place, every lamp calibrated, but the air inside was hollow. He found himself pausing by the small corner where Lily used to sit with Snow, the white stuffed dog still waiting by the cushion that had untouched since the morning they left. Marcus Hale stopped by one afternoon with a stack of financial briefs. "You're presenting at McCombs tomorrow, right?" Ethan nodded. "Yes. The board wants to finalize the AI diagnostics demo." Marcus studied him. "You sure you're ready for a public appearance? You've been different." Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe different is overdue." The next morning, the McCombs School of Business auditorium filled with faculty, press, and corporate partners. Screens glowed with the Walker Dynamics logo. Cameras hummed quietly, waiting. Ethan stepped to the podium. His reflection in the glass lectern seemed foreign. His once polished confidence replaced by something quieter, heavier, but truer. He began not with numbers, but with a story. "When I founded this company, I believed technology could heal faster than people could, that data and algorithms could outthink suffering. But I was wrong. Healing doesn't start with a device. It starts with consent, trust, and compassion." Murmurs rippled across the room. Ethan continued. "This year, we've seen what happens when innovation meets resistance, when cost and policy decide who deserves light. So today, I'm creating something new, a fully transparent 501c3 foundation, the Lily Grace Vision Fund." The audience stilled at the name. He went on, his voice steady. "The fund will finance genetic treatments and visual rehabilitation for children diagnosed with Leber congenital amaurosis across Texas. Every dollar will be audited, every case anonymous. No logos, no marketing, no names, just outcomes." A board member raised a hand. "Mr. Walker, are you suggesting reallocating corporate earnings to philanthropy? That affects our quarterly forecasts." Ethan met his gaze. "It affects something more important, our humanity." Applause began hesitantly, then grew. The press typed furiously. Ethan saw flashes of cameras, felt the pulse of something shifting. Not in the company, but in himself. After the conference, he was approached by Gregory Tate, a representative from a major biotech sponsor. "Ethan, that speech was brilliant, but our investors will only commit if we can brand the initiative, put our logo beside the children's stories. It's PR gold." Ethan's expression cooled. "You want to market hope?" "It's standard practice," Tate replied smoothly. "Visibility ensures more funding." Ethan's answer came sharp and low. "Visibility also robs dignity." "I won't turn patients into billboards." Tate frowned. "You'd walk away from $20 million? "I'd walk away from everything before I let a child's face become an ad." He turned and left the lobby, leaving the stunned man behind. That evening, Ethan stood again by the lake. The water was calm, the city reflected upside down, a mirror world that made him think of Lily. He remembered her fingers tracing the air, her whisper, "This house has a kind sound." His phone buzzed. It was an email from an unknown address. Subject: "For Lily's friend." He opened it. A photo appeared. Lily standing in a small garden outside Texas School for the Blind, holding a cane and smiling, Snow tucked under her arm. Rachel's message followed. "She's doing well. Her mobility therapist says she's ready for next stage evaluation. I heard what you did today. Thank you for the fund and for keeping your promise. We're proud of you. Rachel." Ethan's breath caught. He read the message twice, then again, his chest tightening in quiet relief. He replied simply, "Tell Lily the world sounds brighter already." Then he closed the phone, turned toward the horizon, and let the evening wind move through him like forgiveness. The next day, headlines flooded every Austin outlet. Walker Dynamics CEO declines $20 million sponsorship. launches fund for blind children. From boardroom to benevolence, the tech visionary who chose compassion over capital. Ethan didn't care for the praise. What mattered was that his inbox filled with messages from doctors, parents, and small-town nurses offering collaboration. The fund was already building momentum, sustainable, transparent, real. That night, he updated the project files. Under the section marked Foundational Inspiration, he typed 2 words: Lily Grace. Then, almost unconsciously, he whispered, "You taught me the rules of trust, kiddo, and I'm finally listening." Outside, the lights of Austin glowed against the water, warm, steady, human. And for the first time in years, Ethan's reflection didn't look lonely. It looked alive. Autumn deepened in Austin. The air grew thinner, cooler. Ladybird Lake shimmered like liquid glass under the morning sun. The Lily Grace Vision Fund was already helping its first candidates, 3 children from San Antonio, 1 from Waco, and Ethan Walker had begun to believe, cautiously, that the system could bend toward justice when people refused to let it stay rigid. Until the letter came. It arrived not for him, but for Rachel. She found it folded inside her mailbox one Saturday morning. Travis County Health Plan printed in bold. Her stomach tightened. She tore it open right there on the stairwell, her hands trembling. Claim denied. Procedure not medically necessary under current CPT classification. Her heart dropped. She sank onto the step, the paper shaking in her hands. She had fought this battle before. That night, she called Ethan. Her voice was calm, but it carried exhaustion so sharp he could almost hear the tear in it. "Ethan, they denied Lily's pre-authorization again. They said the code doesn't match the policy. I've filed every form they asked for." Ethan sat at his desk, the city lights flickering behind him. "Send me the letter," he said softly. "I'll look into it." Within an hour, the PDF appeared in his inbox. He recognized the pattern instantly, a bureaucratic stall, built to outlast the patience of the poor. The insurer had misfiled the procedure again, marking retinal reconstruction instead of gene transfer therapy. He felt heat rising in his chest. He called Marcus Hale. "I want to appeal this through the Texas Department of Insurance, and fast. Get our legal counsel ready." Marcus hesitated. "You're sure you want to get involved personally? This could get messy." Ethan's voice was calm but firm. "Messy is what happens when nobody fights back." By Monday morning, a team of pro bono lawyers and medical policy experts was reviewing the case. Ethan joined them via video call, sleeves rolled up, eyes focused. "This denial is invalid," he said, tracing the lines on the document. "The therapy is FDA approved. There's peer-reviewed evidence, documented medical necessity, and an existing fund prepared to cover copay." One of the lawyers, a woman named Angela Cho, known for taking on impossible appeals, nodded. "We can file an expedited review, but it'll take a judge's emergency order to override the hold." "Then we go to court," Ethan said simply. The Travis County Courthouse smelled faintly of rain and paper that had seen too much waiting. Rachel stood in the hallway clutching Lily's hand, the little girl holding Snow against her chest. Ethan was beside them, his suit immaculate but his eyes weary. "You didn't have to come," Rachel whispered. "I did," he replied. "We started this together." Inside the courtroom, the judge, a gray-haired woman with the kind of gaze that had seen both truth and pretense, looked over the appeal. "Mr. Walker, I understand you're representing the foundation funding this case?" "Yes, Your Honor," Ethan replied. "We're prepared to assume all interim costs through escrow until the insurer corrects their classification. The hospital has deemed the treatment medically necessary." The opposing counsel from the insurance group rose smoothly. "Your Honor, While we sympathize, we must operate under policy limitations. The code provided does not—" Angela interrupted, sliding forward a document. "Here are the peer-reviewed trials confirming both efficacy and FDA status for the RPE 65 variant. The policy's exclusion is outdated. Denying this procedure is denying sight itself." The judge studied the evidence, then looked toward Rachel. "Mrs. Bennett, do you understand the risks of this treatment?" Rachel nodded, her voice steady. "I do. But I also understand the risk of doing nothing. My daughter will never see light." Lily turned her head toward the sound. "Your Honor?" The courtroom went silent. The judge blinked, surprised. "Yes, young lady?" "Mommy says grown-ups write rules so people can be safe, but sometimes they forget to read them with their hearts." A quiet murmur spread through the room. Even the court reporter paused. The judge smiled faintly. "Well said, Miss Bennett." 10 minutes later, she banged her gavel once. "Motion granted. Dell Children's Medical Center is authorized to proceed under medical necessity. The foundation will temporarily assume copay responsibility pending insurer correction." Rachel pressed her hand to her mouth, tears slipping free. Ethan reached out, resting a gentle hand on her shoulder. She whispered, "You didn't just fight for us. You fought right." He looked down at her, his voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't charity, Rachel. It's justice." Outside, reporters gathered on the courthouse steps. Flashbulbs popped, questions flew. "Mr. Walker, what made you take this on personally?" Ethan answered simply, "Because no parent should have to choose between sight and survival, and no child should grow up in the dark because paperwork said so." Rachel stood beside him, Lily's small hand gripping hers tightly. For once, she didn't mind the cameras. As they left the courthouse, Lily turned her face toward the light filtering through the clouds. "Mommy, it sounds bright today." Rachel smiled through her tears. "That's because it's finally shining for you, sweetheart." Ethan watched them, his chest swelling with something deep and unnameable. He didn't know if it was love, pride, or relief. Only that the door to something bigger had opened, and none of them would ever be the same again. The morning of the surgery dawned pale and silent over Austin. Fog drifted low along Lady Bird Lake, and the air carried the soft chill of November. Inside Dell Children's Medical Center, the lights were dimmed to a calm, golden hue. The pediatric ophthalmology wing had never felt so sacred, so still. Ethan arrived before sunrise, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a small bundle of white roses. Rachel was already there, dressed in her scrubs, hands trembling slightly as she signed the final consent form. Lily sat beside her on the gurney, snow tucked firmly in her arms, her hair tied with a small ribbon. When Ethan handed Rachel the coffee, their fingers brushed. "How's she doing?" Rachel exhaled. "She says she isn't scared, but I am." Ethan's gaze softened. "That's normal. You've been brave for too long." Dr. Emily Rivera, the lead ophthalmic surgeon, approached with a clipboard. "We're proceeding with voretigene neparvovec injection in the right eye first. The procedure's been approved under the compassionate use protocol." She smiled at Lily. "You ready, sweetheart?" Lily nodded. "Will it hurt?" "Only for a moment," Dr. Rivera replied. "Then maybe you'll start to see dreams." Ethan knelt beside her. "You'll be surrounded by people who care, Lily. And when you open your eyes again, the first thing you'll see might be light. It might be your mom. It might even be me." Lily smiled faintly. "Then I'll know it's real if I can see the color of your voice." Rachel blinked back tears. "She means blue," she whispered. She always said your voice sounds blue. Ethan swallowed hard, then gently touched the stuffed dog in her lap. Then Snow will keep you brave until you do. The nurses wheeled Lily toward the surgical suite, Rachel walking beside her until the doors closed. Ethan stayed back, watching the moment disappear behind glass. He'd spent years watching data move across screens, cells multiplying, graphs rising, lives abstracted into code. But this was real. Human. Irreversible. 3 hours later, the operating room opened. Dr. Rivera emerged, removing her cap, a faint smile tugging at her lips. The delivery went perfectly, she said. The vector attached. Injection successful. Minimal inflammation. We'll keep her sedated for observation. The patch comes off in 48 hours. Rachel's knees nearly gave out. Ethan caught her elbow, steadying her. She's going to be okay, he whispered. For now, Rachel said softly, voice trembling. For now, that's enough. 2 days later, the three of them sat in the recovery room. Lily stirred as Dr. Rivera approached with a pair of sterile gloves. Ready, little one? Lily nodded faintly. Rachel clutched her daughter's hand, her breath uneven. Ethan stood a few steps away, unable to trust his own. The doctor removed the gauze carefully, unwinding layer after layer until the last strip fell away. The room seemed to hold its breath. Lily blinked once, twice, then frowned. Everything's bright, she whispered. Like colors behind a fog. Rachel's heart stopped. Sweetheart? Lily turned toward her mother's voice, and this time her eyes followed. Mommy, she whispered. You have light around you. It's warm. Rachel broke down, sobbing into her hands. Yes, baby. That's me. That's Mommy. Ethan couldn't move. Tears blurred his own vision. Dr. Rivera smiled. She's detecting shape and color differentiation. It's a strong start. Lily's eyes drifted toward him next. She tilted her head slightly. Mr. Ethan? He stepped forward, his throat tight. I'm here. She squinted, her small face lighting up with awe. Your eyes. They look like the lake when the sun's on it. Blue and gold and moving. Rachel reached for Ethan's hand, her fingers trembling, but sure. She sees you. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The machines hummed softly, sunlight spilled through the blinds, and the world felt impossibly fragile, like a prayer answered too gently to believe. Lily reached out toward him. Snow says thank you, too. He can see now because I can. Ethan laughed through tears, kneeling beside her. Tell Snow I'm honored. Rachel wiped her eyes, smiling through the blur. You did this, Ethan. He shook his head slowly. No, we did. All of us. You fought. She believed. Rachel hesitated, then whispered, And you never gave up. For a heartbeat, silence filled the room again, soft, golden, healing. Outside, the sky over Austin brightened into clear blue. Lily looked toward the window, her gaze steady for the first time. The light isn't scary, she said quietly. It's soft, like music. Ethan smiled. That's what hope sounds like. Rachel turned to him, her eyes still wet. Ethan, what do you see? He looked at them both, the child who had taught him to feel, the woman who had taught him to trust, and whispered, Everything that matters. That night, as the city glowed against the horizon, Ethan sat alone by the hospital window. Below, the lake shimmered like it had that first evening he'd offered them shelter. But now, it no longer reflected loneliness. It reflected light, small, imperfect, but real. He pressed his palm against the glass and whispered, "You did it, Lily. You saw the light." And in that whisper was every promise he hadn't known he was keeping. 6 months later, Austin was dressed in spring again. The air carried the smell of blooming magnolias and barbecue smoke drifting from the patios along South Congress. Lady Bird Lake rippled under sunlight like liquid gold. In the condo overlooking it, laughter spilled through the open balcony doors, clear, light, and full of life. It belonged to Lily Grace Bennett. She sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by paints, ribbons, and sheets of tactile art she'd made at her new after-school program. Her white cane leaned neatly against the couch, Snow perched proudly beside her. With partial sight restored, she moved between touch and vision, her fingertips still reading the world, her eyes learning to follow color. "Mommy, come look," she called. "This one feels like sunshine." Rachel appeared from the kitchen, apron dusted with flour, holding a tray of blueberry muffins. "What color's sunshine, baby?" Lily grinned. "All of them." Behind them, Ethan Walker stood by the window, hands in his pockets, watching the scene unfold with quiet awe. His hair was a little longer now, his face softer. The man who once lived by numbers and deadlines now lived by moments like this. The condo had changed, too. The once cold space had become a home. Walls hung with Lily's textured art, shelves lined with Braille books, tactile sculptures, and small photos. Lily and Rachel at the hospital garden. Ethan speaking at a fundraiser. All three of them feeding ducks by the lake. On the dining table stood a framed certificate. Lily Grace Vision Fund. 20 children treated, 200 more approved. Ethan turned as Rachel joined him, wiping her hands on a towel. "You realize she's more famous than I am now?" he teased. Rachel laughed. "She earned it. That speech she gave at the school assembly, half the audience cried." Ethan smiled. "She told them hope has a texture. I still think about that." They stood in companionable silence, watching Lily hum to herself while painting. "Remember," Rachel said softly, "when she called your voice blue?" He nodded. Now she says it looks like it, too. Rachel leaned against the window frame. "She still thinks you're the reason she can see." Ethan's gaze lingered on the child, her golden hair catching the light. "I'm not," he said. "You are. You never stopped believing in her. I just followed your courage." Rachel smiled, her eyes glistening. "Then we'll call it teamwork." A gentle knock came at the door. Marcus Hale entered, holding an envelope. "Sorry to interrupt, boss. Old habits die hard." Ethan chuckled. "You don't work for me anymore, Marcus. You're board chair of the Vision Fund." "Still feels strange," Marcus said, handing him the envelope. "You should see this." Inside was a check, anonymous donor, 7 figures, memo line reading, "For the next generation of light." Ethan whistled softly. "Looks like Lily's story keeps echoing." Marcus grinned. People listen when a child reminds them what grace means. After Marcus left, Rachel looked at Ethan. "You built something that won't need you forever. That's legacy." Ethan shook his head. "No, that's Lily's." From across the room, Lily looked up. "Mommy, Mr. Ethan, can we go to the lake after lunch?" Rachel smiled. "If you finish your painting." "I already did." Lily held up a canvas, a swirl of soft blues, greens, and golds. "This is the lake when it listens." Ethan knelt beside her. "It's beautiful." Lily tilted her head. "It's not finished. It needs people in it. People laughing." Rachel glanced at Ethan, their eyes meeting with unspoken understanding. Then let's add some. That afternoon, the three of them walked down to the boardwalk along Lady Bird Lake. The wind was gentle, carrying the sound of guitars from a nearby cafe. Lily skipped ahead, her hand clutching Ethan's. Snow dangled from her backpack like a guardian angel. When they reached the railing, she turned toward the sunlight, squinting against the brilliance. "It's so bright," she whispered, "but it doesn't hurt anymore." Rachel rested a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "That's because it's your light now." Lily looked up at Ethan. "You know what color your eyes are today?" He smiled. "Surprise me." "They're happy," she said simply. "They look like home." For a long time, none of them spoke. The water shimmered, the city hummed, and somewhere nearby, a street musician played an old country tune about second chances. Rachel leaned against the railing, closing her eyes. "We should thank the world more often," she said softly. Ethan looked at her, his voice low. "Then let's start now." He turned to Lily. "What would you like to thank it for?" Lily thought for a moment, then smiled. "For Mommy's laughter, for Snow's tale, and for you, Mr. Ethan, for finding the light when we couldn't." He swallowed hard, the lump in his throat making words difficult. "You found it first, Lily. You just taught me how to see it." As the sun lowered behind the skyline, golden rays wrapped around them, soft and endless. Rachel reached into her bag and pulled out a small bracelet woven from blue and white threads. "Lily made this for you," she said, handing it to him. "She said it's the color of sight and kindness." Ethan slipped it on, his voice barely a whisper. "Tell her I'll never take it off." Lily laughed. "Then you're stuck with us forever." He smiled. "Good. That's exactly where I want to be." The wind rose gently, carrying laughter across the water, pure, unguarded, alive. From the condo to the courthouse to the hospital and back to this lake, their story had come full circle. What began with a lost child in the park had become a family stitched together not by blood, but by choice, courage, and love. As the sun set, Ethan looked at them. Mother, daughter, the white stuffed dog between them, and whispered the words he'd been saving for months. "My happiness is seeing you see." The lake shimmered back like it understood, and for the first time, there was nothing left to fix, nothing left to prove, only the quiet music of three hearts that finally, fully, found home. If this story of light, love, and second chances touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and stay with us for more journeys that heal and inspire. Because sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can change an entire world. Just like Lily, Rachel, and Ethan found theirs. Subscribe for more stories of hope, compassion, and the beauty of seeing with the heart.